You're listening to Always Player One, a solo board gaming podcast.
Hello, and welcome to Always Player One. I'm Scruffy Gamer.
And I'm Norm.
Today we're talking about Mage Knight, immersiveness in solo games, and competitive solo games. After that, we'll be carrying on the conversation with you guys and taking your responses from last episode's question.
So let's dive straight into the main topic, starting with Mage Knight. So obviously Mage Knight is quite a big game, so I'm not going to go through a full rules explanation, but before we dive into it, if you haven't played before, you probably want to know a little bit about what it's about. So Mage Knight is essentially an adventure game by Vlaada Chvátil. It was released in late 2011, and it's set in the same universe as the Mage Knight collectible miniatures game. Now, in regards to playtime, this is a longer game, normally clocking at around 2.5 to 3 hours for a full playthrough. So you want to set aside a couple of hours for this. You also want to set aside some table space, because the game does take up some room. Now, Mage Knight is a scenario-based game, and for the purpose of this show, unless we say otherwise, we'll be talking about the scenario Solo Conquest. In this scenario, players will take on the role of powerful mages, ordered to find and sack 2 cities, and in Mage Knight, cities kind of act like the final boss. If they're both conquered within the 6-round limit, then you win, and if you don't conquer both cities, then you lose. Players interact with Mage Knight using a unique blend of deck and tableau building. A player's deck starts with basic action cards, which can all be played for their top or bottom row effect, or sideways as a +1 to basic actions like moving, attacking, blocking, and influencing. Players add different cards into their deck, such as advanced actions, spells, which are powered through mana, and artifacts, which provide really cool abilities. As well as good cards, your deck can also become clogged up with wounds if you're unable to successfully block enemies. Now, players recruit unit cards from a common pool, which are then placed in their tableau and provide a once-round benefit. As well as units, your character also has their own unique set of skill tokens, which you can choose from every other time you level up. These also go into your tableau and provide either a once-a-turn or once-a-round benefit. So by the end of your game, your character has made lots of progression, leveled up, and have a real unique set of abilities. Now, the game takes place on a hexagonal map, and this will be added to as your character explores the world. On this map, you'll encounter rampaging orcs, fortified enemies and mage towers, keeps, villages, and honestly, so much more. Each of these locations work with their own unique set of rules and provide their own risk and reward. This provides a vastly different experience each time you play, as the map is randomized. And it's through interacting with this map, a character will level up, add cards to their deck, recruit units into their tableau, and hopefully they'll do this and they'll be strong enough to take on the cities at the end of the game. So that's kind of Mage Knight in a nutshell. Scruffy, would you add anything to that at all?
No, I think you've covered all the bases there. The only thing I would say is I think it's important to point out throughout this entire video, we are probably both going to be singing Mage Knight's praises quite a lot. This isn't a sponsored episode by Mage Knight or anything like that. We're in no way affiliated with them. We just both really like the game.
Yeah, we're both Mage Knight fanboys. It's my favourite solo game. I don't know about you.
Mine too, absolutely. And I think for good reason.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a fantastic game.
So the inspiration for this podcast, the reason for this episode, the reason we're talking about Mage Knight specifically in relation to competitive solo games is actually the Facebook tournament. This tournament has been started on the Solo Board Game group.
Solo Board Gamers Facebook group. It's run by a chap called Valentine. Would you like me to tell the listeners a little bit about the tournament?
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. So as you've already said, this was made as part of the Solo Board Gamers Facebook tournament. And this came about because of an event called the Solo Olympics. So basically the competition organizer, Valentine, he allowed people to add as many options to a poll where they could put their favourite solo game of all time. Then the top 16 games were then picked, or they were then put into a sort of category. I don't know if they were seeded or chosen randomly, but they would then go head-to-head in a closed poll where people would vote.
So the board games themselves had a little tournament before even the play.
Yeah. So the final was between Mage Knight and Spirit Island, and Mage Knight won. So to celebrate, he created this tournament. The tournament format is knockout. So you essentially sign up, go through the solo conquest scenario at a selected city level, and if you succeed, then you go through to the next round, and if you fail, then you're knocked out of the tournament. And with every round that you succeed, these city levels increase in difficulty. And yeah, it's getting harder and harder. It's currently at round 3. We're both still in it, but I haven't done round 3 yet. So the final one is at level 11, which is the highest difficulty for a city. So I don't know. I don't know how I'm going to do, but we'll see.
Yeah, I mean, the round 2 was the hardest difficulty I've ever played on so far, and I recorded a video for it for the song which I put up on my YouTube. But oh my god, the last city in that absolutely blew my mind. Like, it was the hardest encounter I've had in Mage Knight. I mean, I've lost games of Mage Knight before, but usually just from running out of time or momentum because I was, learning the game. But the difficulty level of the encounter was such that I didn't know how I was going to do it when I first flipped them all over. It was a white a white city, and it was a blue city, and the four enemies.
I think it's 5.
5 enemies. God, I can't even remember. It was a little while ago I recorded, but yeah, it was the 5 enemies that I turned over all got buffed up by the city. Oh god, that was nasty. So, and that was a level 9 city, right?
Yeah, that was level 9.
Level 9, which I have faced before. I faced a level 9 before, but I haven't faced a level. I think it was
7.
7 for the earlier one, wasn't it? The first city. Yeah. So it was 7 and 9 for the round we just did. I've done a 6 and 9 before. So now moving into the next round, we're going from 7 and 9 to 8 and 11. And if the 9 city made me scratch my head that much, I just don't know how I'm going to get through this round.
No, I mean, I talk to a lot of people about Mage Knight online quite often. I'm a part of and I think you are as well, Scruffy, a part of the Mage Knight Facebook group as well, which shout out to them. You should join if you like Mage Knight. It's a fantastic community. And the people that are still in the tournament, I look and I've seen them play, before. I've spoken to them before. And I know that they're all better than me.
Yeah.
I'm looking at these people and I'm like, this isn't going to go well.
Yeah, it just makes me think, I wonder what level they're going to go up to, because, I mean, I imagine a lot of them play it on the hardest difficulty and still succeed. Then what? What happens then?
I don't know. If I had to sort of guess, I would imagine that they would start making it that only the top 3 scores will go through, or I don't know.
Oh, you think it might be score based? That'd be interesting. Yeah,
that would really be interesting. So I think something like that. And when it gets to that, I'm definitely out because these guys score much higher than I do. So, but we're in the top 20. It's currently down to top 20. So, hey, that's not too bad.
Yeah, no, very good. How many did it start with? 60, wasn't it?
Yeah, there's about 60 people who entered. Most people dropped down the first round. I think it was just those people didn't have enough time to play a full game of Mage Knight. Like I said in the intro, it's a bit of a long one, about 2.5 to 3 hours. So if you don't have that amount of time to set aside, I think the tournament gives you about a week to do a full conquest, which I think is plenty of time. But I can see that if people have busy lives, they might not be able to find the time to play a full game. So that's fair enough, I suppose.
Yeah, makes sense. I mean, how are you finding the tournament so far? Has it given you a whole new appreciation for Mage Knight? Are you interacting with the game in a way that you haven't before? I mean, for a long time, I think we both just stayed at the same difficulty level, didn't we, on the city?
Yeah, one thing I said this the other day, actually. One thing it has shown me is that I think I will just start playing at a higher difficulty for the city levels as standard, because it was, not only did I appreciate the extra challenge, but the rewards you get for killing more enemies are greater. So you get higher scores, and not only do you get higher scores, but going into the second city, I felt really well equipped. I felt like I had everything I needed. You you get a discount of 4 instead of 3 in the first city for interacting. So that makes a really big difference. Just stuff like that. I felt like not only was it more challenging, but it was more rewarding and it's just more interesting in general. I don't know how you feel about that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I can't see myself ever wanting to go back to 5 and 8 now, just because, like you say, you can get a better score, and so that's really tempting.
It's fun. It's fun.
It does feel very different for this competition playing the game because I noticed a lot. I kept saying it when I was doing my playthrough that I would normally at this point stay in the monastery and pick up another advanced action or buy another spell, but I don't think I need that advanced action, and I'd only be doing that for points. I only care about in the competition getting the victory, not worrying about points so much. And it does feel like a very different way to play the game. Have you found that at all?
Yes. Yes, I have in some ways, probably lesser than yourself because I'm always more concentrating on just winning the scenario than I am on anything else. Of course, if you lose, I don't know if you have the same mentality as me, but if I lose the scenario, I don't even bother counting my score because you lost, so what's the point? But yeah, so if I want to count my score at all, I concentrate on just getting through. But yeah, I have noticed, do I really need to stop here? Do I really need to explore that extra time? I got both the cities. Is there a way into both? Yes, there is. Okay, don't worry about anything else. What have we got in hand? Can we just do it now? If we can, let's give it a try. At least, time's ticking. We need to get through this to get to the next round. So yeah, I guess I am noticing a little bit of a change, but I always play to win the scenario more than count the score anyway. I guess some people are different, but that's how I play the game more anyway. So
Yeah, it makes sense. I think for me it was just a shifting mentality from can I do it to how well can I do it, and then back again. So a very different way to approach the game.
So for those, I know we already nailed our colours to the mast and said that we love Mage Knight, but let's delve a little bit deeper into that. What is it about Mage Knight that you love so much, Scruffy?
Oh, that's such a good question. So for me, I really feel like no other board game makes me feel as immersed in the story, and the story is such an emergent story that it scratches that itch for me in a way no other game does, and at the same time manages to also be this really fun puzzle. So in most board games, you either get one or the other, don't you? You get a game that's really immersive, like you get something like not even a board game, maybe like a role-playing game or something, but it kind of misses out on having the strategy. And then you at the other end, you get like your really heavy Euros where the theme doesn't matter. You're just shipping around a bit of wheat and some wood and whatever, it doesn't matter. And you're doing it for the puzzle. And Mage Knight's the only game I found that does both so well, and that they kind of go hand in hand. That when you flip over a token, it's exciting and dramatic, and then it's a puzzle that you have to solve. And I don't know. To me, it's kind of the perfect thing. I think as a solo game, it really is the best. It's the only one that does what it does. I don't like it as much necessarily for a multiplayer game because of the randomness thing. I'm not going to go into that right now, but in terms of solo, it's absolutely perfect for me. What about you?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. It's as thematic as it is rules heavy and strategy heavy. Like all Mage Knight has a reputation for being overly complex or overly rules heavy, and it kind of is. But what's lovely is that they all make really lovely thematic sense, which adds to the emergent story that you were saying about. The world is in Mage Knight is populated by really, really diverse locations and enemies, and you can really do what you want if you have the cards. There are really some interesting choices. Do you go to the monastery and learn with the monks to get a better card to go in your deck, or do you burn it to the ground, trash its defender, and grab yourself a hidden artifact to do?
Or do you do both? I mean,
yeah, or you can do both. It really puts you in the driving seat. And yeah, like every rule that makes the game difficult to learn makes it more rewarding as an experience, because that that rule when only ice block works against fire attack seems unintuitive and difficult, but it adds to the thematic feel. And there's lots of examples like that. That's one thing I love about Mage Knight. It's rules heavy, but it's equally as thematic as it is rules heavy.
Yeah, I mean, the thing you were saying about having total agency over what you do and where you go, I think is absolutely spot on. Like, I was sat on a monastery right next to the city in the game I played, and I wanted to burn it down. I really did. But I thought, oh, I'll tell you what, I'm going to attack the city first, and then, I assume I might take a few wounds, and then I'll heal up, which I did. And then I'll burn it down. I kept thinking I'll burn it down, and something kept putting me off. Like, well, actually, I need to go over here first. And then I ended up not burning it down until the very last turn of the game. Like, after I completed it and beat the city, you get one more turn. The dummy player doesn't get another go, but you get one more go. And do you know what I did? I burnt it down. It just felt like such a nice ending, I'd been sat on it and kind of flitting between it, like, oh, do I want to? The minute I turned it up, I was like, oh, do I want to burn that down? And then I did right at the end. It felt like a really nice, nice way to round off Tobak's journey. There, he turned out to be a bad guy after all,
And another thing you were saying about how it has this emergent story, and it kind of has a similar narrative to Friday that we talked about last episode. Where you you build your deck and you build your sort of tableau all with the final fight in mind. When you're picking your first spell card, that might be with the city fight in mind right at the beginning of the game. My last game I played, I picked up a spell called Expose, which is really, really useful for city fights. And I picked that up after in a maze in my first encounter in the game in the first round. So in the first round, you're already thinking about how the final fight's going to play off. So it has this really nice narrative where you build and build and build, and then you get to use what you've built in a really satisfying and crunchy way. The final battles on the cities are really, really brain burning and horrible. But
and that meta puzzle there that you're trying to not only deal with every encounter that you interact with in the game, but you have a bigger puzzle where you're trying to work out how you're going to beat the boss at the end. It's such a good storytelling device. It's such a good way to increase the immersion, because that's the reason that I went, oh, I want to go and burn that monastery down and get that treasure. It's because I wanted that treasure for the last fight. So it's that meta decision made me want to do that.
It really makes you feel like you're on a mission, on a quest. No other adventure game makes me feel like that. And it's weird to say this because this is probably, some people would argue, like real adventure gamers would argue, that Mage Knight is a bit too thinky. So it's funny that this is the game that I think feels the most like an actual quest. Some people may disagree with that, but I really think because...
Yeah, I think it makes sense. I mean, because you draw your hand of cards and you look at your hand of cards and you say, okay, where can I go? I want to go to that monastery, but I don't have enough movement. So where can I go? And that's kind of like, in terms of an RP way of thinking about it, it's like you haven't got the supplies to get where you want to go. So what are you going to do instead? You can only make it this far. Where are you going to go? And then you have to work it out based on that. And wherever you go in Mage Knight, it's an adventure, it's a journey, it's an encounter. Something's happening. Even if you're just going and standing on a mine to get a crystal at the end of your turn, that's something that happened.
Mm-hmm. I absolutely agree. It's really, really interesting, and we can't express enough how, like, we're making it sound like it is a really thematic game, but we can't express enough how crunchy the decision making is in Mage Knight. I don't know if you watch Slickerdrips, the YouTuber, but he put Mage Knight as his #1 solo game, and he said, I'll never forget what he said. He said, Mage Knight is a game where I feel if I just sat and thought about it enough, I could do it. If I just had enough time to think about it, I could probably work it out and do the thing that seems impossible.
That is the case, isn't it? You get people posting in the Mage Knight group all the time being like, look at my cards, look at these enemies. Was there any way to do it without taking 2 wounds in my hand? And that's the game, isn't it?
Yeah. it's an efficiency puzzle.
Mm.
That's it. At its core, when you're making your decisions, as thematic as it feels, it is all about efficiency. It's all about how, can I use this card now? Do I use it later? And the game lets you keep. We said how it is a bit of a uses a bit of deck building mechanisms, but you get to keep cards in your hand between turns if you don't want to use them. So sometimes you want to hold cards in your hand between turns. Sometimes you want to fly through your deck really quickly. It's all about understanding how efficient your deck needs to be in the current situation and how you can be flexible for that. And it's just wonderful. It's just a wonderful puzzle. I love it.
I mean, that thing you say about keeping cards, it brings up an interesting thing of pacing in the game, where in solo play, you have a dummy player there that's only job is to set the pace. If once it cycles through its deck, it draws 3 cards every turn, just discards from the top of its deck. And if one of those matches a color with one of the crystals it has, it draws more. So it's going to be maybe 3, maybe more cards it draws every turn. And as soon as it finishes its deck, it calls the end of the round on its turn, and then you've got one more turn. So if you've kept all your cards back and tried to really optimize them and use them all as efficiently as possible, you might have half your deck left that you haven't used, which is definitely not efficient, and you're wasting a lot of potential there. Which I think that's a lovely little way to pace the game and keep you going, keep you moving as fast as you can. But those decisions where you go, I don't want to waste this card. This is a good card. I could use it for a move and go an extra space, but I want to keep it.
Yeah, it's really interesting, and understanding how many turns you've got left in a dummy, with the dummy player, is a big part of the game that I didn't get when I was learning the game. Is not an easiest game to learn. When going back 2 years ago when I first started playing the game, it's not something I worried about at all. But now when I take cards, I'm looking at what it's going to leave the dummy player, because the dummy player.
Oh, absolutely. The dummy player to me feels like the antagonist a lot of the time. I even have a thing where if I get Noroas as my dummy player, I usually select it at random. But if I ever get Noroas as my dummy player, I just feel like he's out to get me. He's always drawing the color card that matches the most crystals. He's drawing as many cards. I'm just like, oh, Noroas, Whereas there are other ones, like I always feel like Tovak's really friendly. He's always really nice to me whenever Tovak's in there. he's always chill. He takes it slow. It's fine.
A couple of months ago, I lost a scenario for the first time in a while, and then the next time I played with Wolfhawk, and I won again. And since then, I haven't not played with Wolfhawk as a dummy player, just like superstition.
Yeah, it's all projection, but I think it's nice that you can engage with these mechanics in that way, and that they do elicit that level of feeling and I guess you'd call it personality. I don't know, because it's a person, because it's a Mage Knight that's the dummy player. If it was just a timer, like a dice ticking down, it wouldn't have anywhere near the same effect.
No, and you mentioned about how the Mage Knights have a personality. They play really differently.
That's one thing you didn't mention in the rules expo, that you get to pick your Mage Knight, don't you? And it's everyone plays so differently. They all have 2 cards that are their own specific cards, but they also have a set of skills that are related to their specific character, and they skew the game so much. They make such a massive difference.
No, absolutely. They really feel different. When you're playing as Noroas and when you're playing as Arathea, you feel like you're incentivized to do completely different things, and you really get a sense of their personality. I don't want to sound silly, but you really get a sense of their personality.
There's no other word for it. They all have distinct personalities. I feel like I know those Mage Knights now that I've played with them, and that's such a weird thing, but it's true. The level of immersion that their skills create. Oh, this one gets an extra move at night. Wow. The other guy that has the similar skill gets an extra move in the day. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
Something little like that just makes you go, that one's a night owl. That one's a what's the opposite of a night owl? A day bird.
Day bird. Yeah, that's the thing, a day bird.
Yeah, absolutely. You heard it here.
We'll just style that out. Yeah. Yeah, but the feeling of progression you get as those skills come out. See, the thing is, the cards in your deck are already good. They're already good cards that you start with, but everything in the game is so hard that when you start getting skills and your character starts leveling up, that feeling of progression is so satisfying. And to get it, I mean, it's a 3-hour game, so in one sitting to play through the whole thing, you have a really big character arch that's really fun to see out through the whole play. I don't know what you think about that, Scruffy.
Absolutely, yeah. You get really invested in it. I mean,
it's super interesting. But one thing we haven't even mentioned, probably my favorite thing about Mage Knight, is the combat system. I love the combat system in Mage Knight. It is one of the best in any game. I mean, I've not played a game with a combat system against an AI that feels anywhere near as interesting as Mage Knight does.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. It's really good. It's really good. I think one of the things for me is the way it works is you have a siege attack phase where if you've got any siege attack cards, you play them. Then a ranged attack phase, as long as they're not fortified, and you play them. If you defeat them in either siege or ranged attack, they're dead. Problem solved. Job done. If you couldn't or didn't, they get to attack you, and you must block their attack. And that's hard. That's harder than doing damage in the game because it can get very complicated. And then if you don't block them, you're taking wounds into your hand or assigning wounds to your units. And if you do block them, great. Then you can go on to just attacking them with regular attack. The reason that's so good from my perspective is it allows for the metagame thing I mentioned earlier, where you can design your deck to do one thing really well, or you can try and do a bit of everything. So you might play a game where you go, well, I'm just going to do everything I can to get as much siege attack into my deck as possible, which is hard to get. You get lower value cards and they're rarer. But if you do that, then you can just cheese it and take them out before they can do damage to you. If not, maybe you want to go for a deck that's going to fight honestly and have lots of block in it and then attack afterwards. And then you're probably not going to want the siege or ranged attack cards. And that decision level happens before you engage in the fight. And then when you engage in the fight, you're relying on the deck that you've built. I mean, that puts the player in such the driving seat for the whole game. I find that spot on.
It really, really is so clever. And what we haven't even gotten into is the enemies don't just have attack values and armor that you have to defeat, but they also have resistances and special abilities, so they all behave so differently.
It's almost like they have their own personalities as well.
Yeah, and they really do, because the enemies that you come up against are the same people that you can recruit as units. So when you see them as an enemy token, you see what damage they do to you. But what's really interesting is you can see from a design point of view how they've gone, how would that look if someone played that character? And you look at the unit card and you have how their abilities work for you. And that's so lovely. So it really is like you have you know their personalities, because you see both sides of the coin when they're working for you and when they're working against you. You know, I think that's in itself is really, really, really clever design. But I mean, the abilities that they have and the way the abilities stack, you know, can make such a dynamic piece of combat with what is essentially playing cards to meet a number. And it doesn't feel like that at all. It feels like, oh gosh, I need to do some, you know, this guy's fortified. I need to do some siege attack. Oh gosh, I can't get quite enough siege attack. Because the thing is, in this game, it's either you do it all or you do nothing. If you're one short of blocking, then guess what? You take their full attack. If you're one short of killing in siege, then your siege is ineffective. You have to move to the next phase of the attack.
It's absolutely brutal, yeah.
And that makes it really, really challenging. And on top of that, you have elemental attacks like fire, ice, and cold fire. And some enemies have resistances to those. So if you're using those, your attacks become ineffective and are halved. And it makes for such a compelling puzzle. You mean, sometimes you can really sit there and think about it and think about it and think, there's no other way I can do this. So, oh, wait, light bulb moment. actually, I can, and I do it. Ha ha ha! I'm brilliant, and it makes you feel so clever. It's really engaging. There's no other combat system like the one in Mage Knight. It's a little bit difficult to get your head around at first, but once you've got it, you've got it, and there's not much to it.
Wow, yeah, I mean, you say that, but even now, I still overlook some rules. I noticed in my playthrough, I made a couple of little mistakes.
No, absolutely. Yeah, I honestly, if I also recorded my playthrough, I'm sure I would have made a mistake along the way because it's a long game and there's lots of little bits of minutia that you can overlook if you're not being extremely careful. But that's a small price to pay for having such an involved and brilliant experience, in my opinion.
It does make it slightly problematic for a competition, I think. But I mean, obviously, it's not something that anyone would willfully do. But the fact that you can so easily make a mistake or misremember a rule and stuff, or even just some of the skills, you just kind of go, "How does that work? What does that word mean?" You know. It can make it very problematic if you accidentally break the game. You know.
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting game to do as a competition because I speak to people on the Mage Knight Facebook group and I see people messing up rules, but I mean, you'll get there with the game. If you keep playing, you will get there. It's not the most straightforward game to learn, but it is absolutely really, really, really rewarding. So moving on from Mage Knight, talking a little bit more about competitive solo games. So, Scruffy, is this your first experience at a competitive solo game? Have you done anything else?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't even know they existed. To be honest, I didn't know it was. I guess it's a fairly new thing, is it? Or is it just new to me?
I don't know because this is the first one that I've taken part in as well. But I think it's such an interesting idea. The idea of you kind of get the best of both worlds, don't you? You kind of get a solo
It's like
game.
solo multiplayer, isn't it? Where you're playing an extra little game against other people while you're playing the solo game yourself.
Yeah, and I think that's really interesting. I think the need to what's most compelling about it is just playing a game that you really, really like at the same time as a bunch of other people online are playing a game that they really, really like and being able to talk about it and share stories. And I'm really enjoying reading the comments and seeing how other people did and where they failed or where they succeeded or how the increase in difficulty affected them. I'm having a really good time just on that part of it as much as I am playing the game.
Yeah, and I think Mage Knight's perfect for that sort of thing as a because it does create so many stories, and you look at other people and you go, oh, that stat is horrible. I saw somebody drew a tile that had just nothing nearby. I was like, oh, that's killer, something like that. What a horrible start to your adventure, but they still managed to do it, and it's like, yeah, good for you. It gives you such vivid stories just from turn one. But throughout the game, every encounter and certain moments are real highlights and stuff. The closest thing I'd ever come to doing a tournament before wasn't multiplayer, but it was Mage Knight. And that is that I set up a little tournament where I competed with the Mage Knights against the other Mage Knights in a solo game. That's still ongoing at the moment. But I feel like doing that adds a sort of another level to the thing. Each game becomes a battle in a bigger war. Each game becomes an individual story within a larger tale, which I think is really interesting.
Yeah, it feels really epic. And I remember when when you started that, you completely blew me away because you played. How many games did you play the first day you started that?
So yeah, I played 6 games of full conquest in one day.
I can't even imagine that.
I just blitzed through it. It was fantastic.
That's like what, 15 hours?
So that was the first round of all the Mage Knights. This is before I heard about the tournament as well. So that was 5 to 8 difficulty. They all competed against each other except Goldix because there's not quite the right number of them. So he got through without having to fight. This was all done randomly. But yeah, they all competed in one day, and the winners, whoever got the highest score in the solo games, got through, and they were all went on to the 6 to 9 rounds, 6 to 9 city rounds.
Nice.
which is where they are now. They got suspended there because this Facebook tournament started, so I got distracted by that instead.
It's a good distraction, and I'm looking forward to seeing how that ends up. My personal favourite Mage Knight is eliminated, though.
Yeah, well, she was against your other favourite, wasn't she? It was Tovak versus your favourite.
Yeah, I mean, I love Arathea. You know, she's my favourite. One thing I always not super struggle with, but one thing I tend to find is Arathea moves a little bit slowly. I'm not sure if that's what other people find, but her cards like Battle Versatility and her skills, they don't really. She has Dark Paths, so she can move more at night. But I feel like she's not super set up to move very quickly. I feel like she always, when I play Arathea, I never finish around early, or I never even get close to finishing around early. I'm always doing the final city attack on the final round of the game because I feel like she's got enough movement to get her there. And enough attack to kill everything in her way along the way. That's how I kind of feel, and that's I really like that feeling of we're gonna get there slow and steady. Let's kill this. Let's kill this orc. Let's take down this mage tower first, and we'll explore later. I finish round 1 and round 2 sometimes with very little explored tiles on the board with Arathea before. I don't know, some people probably listen and thinking that's not how you play Arathea, but that's how I feel. She's definitely a little bit slower than some of the other mage knights, in my opinion. I don't know if that's something you've come across. I don't know how many times you played Arathea.
I've played her a few times. Yeah, I mean, maybe that's one of the reasons I don't get on with her. And also, I find it with Goldix as well that he just wants to plod along and pick up crystals. And I like to try and race for that first core tile as quickly as I can. If I can get that out by the start of day 2, that's good. That's really good. At the end of day 2, worst case scenario, but start of day 2, if I can, you sometimes have to try and really, really push it to get that, but we'll get lucky.
Yeah, and we were talking about how the game makes you feel like you're on a quest and how you have the end goal in mind, and that's one example of it. Because when you get the better tiles out, the better map tiles out, the what they're called the core tiles, the units that become available are better, and there's lots of mini goals like that. By day 2, I want to have achieved X, Y, and Z. And you may not be aware of them the first few times you play the game, but you'll find that the more you play, the more you set goals for yourself. The more you're like, okay, I want to level up twice in round 1. I want to recruit at least 1 unit. I want to, or by the end of day 2 of nighttime 1, which is round 2. I want to have X amount of units and X amount of skills, and yeah, I find myself setting lots of mini goals like that. Do you find the same thing, or
Yeah, absolutely. And what's really interesting about that is that it doesn't detract from the immersion. In many ways, it enhances it. So you might end up thinking that makes it feel like you're just ticking off a checklist. In a lot of games, like especially in video games or whatever, if you replay them a lot, if you try and ever do speed running, it boils it down to the core base mechanics, and you kind of lose some of the life of the game. I mean, maybe I'm just at that sweet point at the moment with Mage Knight where I haven't tipped over into it being just a spreadsheet of numbers, but it, at the moment, feels like because of the nature of the game, those goals and those I need X of Y actually become part of the journey and part of the adventure. How am I going to do this? Where am I going to go? What building's going to help me? What enemies are going to be in my way? What units are going to be my best allies to achieve this goal? What skills that are available over there would help me get there? What are the tools I can pick up to achieve those quests I set myself? It actually adds to the immersion for me.
Absolutely. And just when I feel like I have tipped over that point and I am starting to understand the strategy not too well, but I get it enough that it becomes procedural, I realize that actually there's a much more efficient way of doing it, and I'm doing it wrong, and now I have to figure that out as well, because there's a really high. It's very skill dependent. The game, I feel like this is one of the games that I've gotten better at more than any other game I've played. The room for you to improve is is huge. Would you agree?
Yeah, it's hard to pick up and hard to master.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So when you think I've got this now, you realize, oh no, actually I shouldn't put the tiles out this way. I should explore in this way. Or actually, this what I was doing that isn't as powerful as I thought. It would be much better if I spent my cards like this. And actually, this skill that I've never played with is
It's incredibly reactionary, isn't it? That whatever comes out in the offer will totally dictate the game, and it every time is different. There might be similarities. You might see the Delphine Masters come up and go, yes, I've got to get them or whatever, but it might not be possible. You know, in my last game, that specifically happened, that they came up and I'd usually just do everything I could to get them, but I was miles away from the first keep. I couldn't go back and get them at that point. I'd committed to going around the long ways around, and I was on my monastery, and there was no way to go and find them. There are other little rules you set yourself, but those rules are not always going to come into effect, and the game will dictate that you have to react to it, and if you don't, you might lose.
Yeah, and that actually brings up something else I want to talk about, which was the replayability, because you just touched on something there. That card that you're relying on that might not even become available. There are still cards that I've never played with in this game. There are still advanced actions that I haven't chosen. There are still artifacts I haven't. I saw an artifact online the other day, and I thought I don't actually remember seeing this before. I probably have. Mage Knight is my most played game, so I thought I probably have, but I'm really drawing a blank on this. And I had to read through what it does and and what the rules are for it. And I thought that's amazing. I've been playing the game as much as I do, and there's still cards that I didn't know or I've not played with before.
Yeah, if you've seen them, you might not have picked them up or used them. Like I realised I hadn't really done much with banners in the last game I played. I might have picked them up and put them on the unit and forgotten about them, but I came to look at the bottom row of one of the banners I put on my unit and went, oh, I really want to use that. I might just try and use that then and heal the unit. And then I had to double check the rules and be like, if you to use a bottom row of a banner, it has to be in your hand. Didn't know that because I never play with banners, you know?
And I think that's amazing that the replayability is so it's through the roof. I mean, even if you just I was doing a bit of maths earlier, and I thought even if you just want to play with each city combination with every character once, that's still 42 plays of the game of the solo conquest scenario, and there's more scenarios, and when you add in on top of that varying difficulty, and then when you add in on top of that random setup, and then on top of random setup, random enemy draws, you end up with what is essentially an infinitely replayable game. I
mean, I felt like with the base game, I started to notice the cards a lot more. But as soon as I got Lost Legion, and that's the only expansion I have that I own, it adds just a world of replayability, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, even if you just played one scenario with each city combination with each character, that's still over 40 plays of the game. What was the last game you played 40 times? I would really scratch my head to find a game I've played that much. And yeah, it's infinitely replayable. And like I said, you've got additional scenarios, and you just touched on the expansions there. There's the Lost Legion, and there's also Shades of Tesla expansion, which adds different scenarios as well, which are all playable solo. But yeah, I mean the replayability is through the roof. I mean, it's not even got a campaign mode. But you still, the story is so compelling. You will want to keep coming back for more, in my opinion. So just going back to competitive solo gaming. So before we did the episode, I was looking up at some other examples of competitive solo games, and I found it really difficult to find any other solo tournaments. There wasn't many that I was able to find, but what I was able to do is find other ways that people can compare their scores and be competitive with each other. So a couple of examples I found. Do you remember in episode 1 when we were talking about Feast Rodin?
Yeah.
I mentioned how there's a challenge booklet and how you can go through those challenges, and it means that the game will be the same no matter who plays it. The the decks will be stacked, etc. Well, I found out that there's a bunch of solo challenges for lots of different games, and people on BGG are going on and comparing their score and comparing their strategies. And I think that's really what this enjoyment of this idea of competitive solo games comes from, this need to want to talk about a game that you love and enjoy reading about what other people have done. Like I already mentioned, I think this is, although that's not a competition, that is sort of in the same spirit as what we're doing with this Mage Knight tournament. Do you agree with that? Or
Yeah, absolutely. Sounds really interesting. I mean to go and check it out once maybe all the dust settled on this Mage Knight stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Another thing I noticed is there's plenty of apps that have like a competition mode. In episode 2, we spoke about Friday, and Friday has a really, really good app, and they run something called a King of the Island tournament. Now, they've done over 70 tournaments, so people can go on there and play solo games, but at the end, they compare their scores, and people are knocked out, and eventually you get a winner. So you can register for those at any time. They're really, really regular tournaments, and that's much less problematic from an organizational point of view compared to what we're doing with the Mage Knight thing. You already mentioned about how people forget rules and how we've forgotten rules for Mage Knight before. That's obviously impossible when there's an app involved. So maybe that's something. But I think what you lose with the app is you lose the whole point of why it's fun. The reason it's fun is not.
I mean, I'm not that fussed about doing well in the tournament with this Mage Knight tournament. For me, the fun really is coming from being a part of a shared thing, not only having an excuse to play a game I love, but also being able to then sort of hand in my work and say, look, guys, look what I did. Other people give me validation. And that's quite nice, because it is a big achievement being able to get through a puzzly game like this, to commit to it, to sit down and do it. You deserve a pat on the back. Everyone should get a pat on the back every time they complete a game of Mage Knight. And it's nice to have that community to go to and be like, oh, I did it. I made it through the round, guys. Or if you don't make it, just be like, oh, I'm out this time, but good luck everyone else, I mean, yeah, to me, that's something quite magic.
Yeah, and even if I'm eliminated, I think I'm still going to follow the tournament and see how people get on. And what's really nice about it is because it's unlike an actual multiplayer tournament, you don't have to go and set aside a whole day to do it. You can play it as you want and take. So I played my playthrough on Tabletop Sim. So I think I played over like 3 different days, where I'd set it up, I'd done a couple of rounds, I saved it, I came back to it the next day. And that was really nice, It's really relaxed. It's just something going on in the background that you can get your little notification on Facebook saying, oh, they've just posted and the rules for round 3. Like, oh, what's it going to be? What have I got to look forward to this week? It's been really, really fun. And I think, with the app tournament, although it's less problematic from a competitive standpoint, I don't think it's as much fun, to be honest. But that's something that's quite popular. So that's interesting. But yeah, Mage Knight is an interesting one for a competition because, I can't imagine anyone doing a perfect run and not getting something, not missing some trigger or some rule. But the fact that so many people have entered knowing that and they don't care because they just want to have a good time, that's awesome.
No, we need to definitely update our listeners at the beginning of next episode, because after this episode, we've got both of us one day to do this next round of the tournament, haven't we? We've got to have it done by the end of tomorrow. So we'll have to say next episode whether we're still in the tournament or we got eliminated. That'll be a fun little update we can do.
Is it the end of tomorrow? I thought it was. Oh gosh, I thought I had more time. Okay, I better get on that. We'll definitely either be into round 4 or we'll be eliminated.
But we'll keep you guys updated. Keep you on the edge of your seats until next episode.
I don't know what's going to happen. I think this could be the road.
If that last blue city is anything to go by, I think I'm out of this on next round. I don't think I'm going to manage another round. I think I need to maybe move on to a different character beyond Toback because he's too honest.
He's too honest.
What do you think? Do you think you'll make it? How did you find? I haven't really asked you about your last playthrough. Tell me about how that went for you.
I didn't score super high, but I didn't ever feel like I was in danger of not doing it. Once I got past the first couple of rounds, I felt like I was doing what I needed to do. I was ticking those boxes, I was like, okay, I'm meeting all my goals. It moved on to the final round of the game, and I started in the city that I just conquered, and the Autumn Mages were available on the unit offer, and I had a spare unit space as well from leveling up from finishing off the city.
Oh, I know you're a big fan of those guys.
I love the Autumn Mages, and I knew as soon as they came up, my Arathea deck was full of big attacks. I just picked up Blood Rage on my last level up, which does 9 attack. So, so I then moved across to the Green City was my final city. So it was only protected by one, like outside the city, there was a rampaging orc. So I used concentration and swiftness to get rid of them. And then I moved into the city and I used Arathea's skills. She produced a red mana crystal and a black mana token. And then I used her motivation to draw 2 additional cards. So I had 9 cards in hand, and all my attack was siege attack. So I just took them all out on the siege phase.
Wow,
that was pretty.
To just wipe them out with siege like that. That's brutal. Very nice.
Yeah, I mean, well, that's what you can do when you have the Autumn Mages. They turn all attack played that turn into siege attack if you play a black mana. It was really straightforward, if I'm honest.
You're taking Arathea with you into the next round with the same game plan in mind, I guess.
Well, I mean, when you get a unit as powerful as the Autumn Mages, it really changes your whole strategy. You're kind of like, well, I was building up, but now I don't have to worry about anything. I just got to do a big attack. That's all I have to do. So I don't know. You can't really plan for that, because what if I don't get them? I think I'm going to take Arathea again because she's my fave. We'll see where we go. I just play the game the way I normally play it, and if I win, I win, and if I lose, then I gave it a good shot, and I'm glad it wasn't eliminated straight away. But if you were, fair enough. Mage Knight's a really difficult game, and sometimes you get a bit of bad luck with the way the tiles come out and stuff. So,
absolutely.
How are you feeling about next round? Are you feeling confident or?
No, because of that last city. I'm like, if I get the blue city again, and it's all Delphine Masters and the L10 mages and those fire gunners. What are they like? We'll see. I'm gonna go in it very cautious. I'm gonna go in it with the same sort of game plan. Just take toe back and win, and we'll see how we do. I'm really excited, actually, really genuinely excited. How many people do you anticipate will be left in after this round of the competition?
There are some talented players. I don't think it's going to be that big a drop off.
Do you think it'll just be 2 less, me and you?
Yeah, there'll definitely be 2 less. But I think, I don't know, there are some talented players. There's some people on there who are on the leaderboard on the Mage Knight board game group, and that's another way you can interact with a solo game on a sort of competitive basis. So if you enjoy a game and you play it solo, absolutely check to see if there's a Facebook group, because on the Mage Knight Facebook group there is a leaderboard. If that Facebook group doesn't have one and you want one, suggest one and come up with rules on how to keep people honest. And that's really interesting. I've actually never submitted to the leaderboard. I've looked and I thought, I've scored higher than some of those. But I've never actually submitted. But I do enjoy looking at seeing who's on there and what they've done. I think the top score for Solo Conquest is 300 on there. And I just think, I can't imagine getting that higher score.
I mean, it depends on the city levels, because neither of us have played with the big city levels. And I feel like that's how you got to do it, because you get so much more of an opportunity to attack multiple enemies in one turn, I
think for the leaderboard, it specifies what city levels you have to play.
Yeah,
I think that's just 5 and 8.
Oh, for real? How can you get that with 5?
I have no idea. But there you go.
Well, after this game, when we've had to deal with the scary cities, we'll try going back to 5 and 8. We'll be like, this is easy.
Maybe.
I'll feel like taking a city will feel like taking a keep or a mage tower or something. But this is nothing.
I'm not sure. They're always compelling puzzles. When you have to take on multiple enemies at any time, even if it's not on a city, even if it's like on an ancient rune or a spawning ground. I always think when there's multiple enemies, choosing who to prioritize. Maybe you just got enough block for one of them, but not both. I think it's really compelling. I mean, I know I said the word compelling a lot during the podcast.
Hey, it's the Mage Knight appreciation episode. That's what this is.
Absolutely.
Right. Oh, and that brings us towards the end of the show. So at this point, we will be going over the correspondence from you guys from last episode, any answers you've given us to the question we asked last episode. And we'll be asking another question. So I'll ask that question now, and then we'll dive into the correspondence, which Norm will be reading out. So the question this episode is, what is the most immersive solo board game experience you have had?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. I can't wait to hear people's answers. I've loved this part of the show where people write in and interact with us. I love it just because I want to play more games. And when people recommend stuff that I haven't heard of or seen before, I'm like, whoa, okay, cool. What's this?
And it's always very exciting for me because I don't know what's coming up now. This is all I'm just sat here going, oh, is there anything? Is there nothing? I'm just going to turn around and say, nope, nobody said anything.
No, luckily we have had a few people. So first of all, thank you for writing in. As I said last episode, I'm just going to use people's first names. Hope you're fine with that. So the first one we've had is from Sam. Now, Sam said, he wrote in saying he's enjoying the show and he has a bit of an interesting discussion point. So he said, we talked about parallels between solo gaming and speedrunning in terms of competitive elements of trying to beat your own score and beating your friends' top scores. So I think he's referring to episode 1 there, where we sort of briefly mentioned that.
Yep.
From his experience with board games, some of the rules are a little bit open to individual interpretation. So he goes on to say, do you feel like these individual interpretations or even sometimes house rules will be different enough to create a problem, or is it negligible enough that it doesn't matter when you're trying to play solo games from like a competitive experience? He wanted to know our thoughts on that sort of thing.
Oh, that's really interesting because, I mean, there's a difference there, isn't there, between accidentally overlooking a rule and kind of willfully ignoring the rules. And in some ways, it feels almost like it might be harmless. I thought for a while, and specifically bringing this to Mage Knight, I thought I was just going to be like, I'm going to ignore one of the rules and do it differently. And that rule is the one you mentioned slightly earlier in the episode. It's the rule that you have to block fire attack with ice block and ice attack with fire block to get the full benefit. And I was like, that doesn't make sense. I should block fire attack with fire block. But I've started to realize the reason it's there mechanically, and it's to make the cards kind of balance out. When you have an attack card that says you get 5 fire attack or 5 fire block, it becomes useful against either type of enemy. An enemy that has ice attack or ice resistance. And so it's balanced for that purpose. And I think if I'd kind of stuck to my stubborn, stupid guns, I'd be playing a slightly different game to what everyone else is playing. So it would be in some ways invalid in the competition. But I don't know, maybe there are some house rules that are innocuous and harmless. But I think to some extent, you've got to all be playing the same rules in a competition, right?
Yeah, I think it's actually one of the rules that you will have to play by the rules in the book. But you never know. Sometimes with board games, people play with house rules for so long they forget their house rules. I mean, that's the really famous case with Monopoly. Everyone says, "Oh, if you actually play Monopoly with the rules, it's not such a bad game." I disagree with that, but it's something that people say. People do famously. People don't read rule books. People just don't read rule books. They're not fun to read. And once you know the rules, you want to spend as little time in the rule book as possible. So it is, Sam, I think that's a really interesting point. It's something that could happen. The question you have to ask yourself is, how much do you really care?
I mean, I think in terms of beating your own score, house rule away, right? I mean, if you just say, I play Mage Knight with my own little rules and this is the highest score I got, that's great. But if you're ever trying to compare your scores to someone else in a competition or whatever, I guess you kind of got to be playing from the same playbook, haven't you? I mean, that's
absolutely.
my hot take on it anyway.
Yeah, but that was a really interesting one, Sam. So thank you so much for writing in. Next up, we had Glyn. Remember Glyn from episode 1?
Yeah, hey, Glyn.
Yes, Glyn. So he wrote in. He said, "Hi Norm." So this is so he's not talking to you.
Oh, fine.
So he said, just listened to episode 2 on Sunday whilst he's on a little holiday. So if you remember from previous episode, he lives in Vietnam. He said Vietnam has seen no new cases, obviously talking about COVID-19, for a month. So he's on a holiday, which is obviously a bit of a luxury. But that's awesome. Really glad to hear that they're doing so well. So
Yeah,
hope you're
that's
enjoying your holiday, Glenn. That wasn't the end of the letter, by the way. He goes on. He said, I thought the adjustments to the format worked well, obviously talking about the episodes. He felt like he was definitely more in the game this time. And he said, thanks for the shout out. And he really appreciated us reading through his comments. He also appreciated how you did a playthrough and how you do playthroughs on YouTube for each game we play for people who want to know a little bit more. So that's awesome to hear. Thank you very much for the feedback.
Oh, that's really cool. Thank you for that, Glenn.
He goes on to say, in regards to games that are too hard, he referenced a game called Deckscape: Fate of London. Have you heard of this before?
Deckscape or Deckscape?
Deckscape. D-E-C-K, Scape.
No, I have not.
So I actually should have looked up for the episode, but I didn't. So apologies for that, Glenn. I will do as soon as the episode's over.
Yeah, that sounds awesome. I'll have to check that out. And he says it's a hard one, yeah?
Well, this is it. Actually, this is what's interesting. He says that apparently it's a puzzle game, so the puzzles are mostly solvable and pretty fun, but the scoring system suggests that it should be done in an hour. And he said that he couldn't even read the puzzles in that time, let alone solve them in that time. So actually, he's not saying the game is too hard to play. He's saying that the game sets such a high standard that it feels like he hasn't played well, even though he's done all the puzzles in the game. Which I think,
I see. So it's kind of like an escape room type game, I guess, where you need to solve the puzzles to complete the game.
I'd imagine so. With a name like Netscape, that's probably what it is.
It's not just that the game's sort of recommended game time is an hour, because those are notoriously a little bit.
No, so the scoring system is based on how quickly you do it, apparently. So
right.
He's suggesting that actually he plays through the game, feels fine about it, and checks his score and goes, "Oh, actually, this must be really hard." That's interesting. Maybe they've just
game's hard, but hard to do well. Is that it? Yeah, that's really interesting.
That is an interesting one.
So it goes back to something we were mentioning a while ago, where we said that for some games, it's not about a win-lose condition. You might eventually be able to win at Deckscape, but it's about then what score do you get as to your metric for how well you did. Sort of like Feast for Odin, where there isn't a loss condition when you're playing solo. There's just a score at the end.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting one, but I don't know how I feel about that. Probably have to play the game to see. But yeah, that's interesting. That it's not, he said the puzzles are manageable, but actually the standard that the game sets for you is too difficult. It's too high, and you only realize that once you've finished the game. That's a weird one.
Have like a timer running, like for each of the different things, saying like a sand timer for you've done it amazingly, and then you have to flip over. No. You watch your score go down as the sand timers run out, or
and
an
just
alarm
watch your morale fall as you play.
Yeah, alarm goes off. No, I'm not a genius. Oh, you hear your final alarm. You go,
now I need to have better luck next time. Oh goodness. Yeah. Okay.
Really put the pressure on, wouldn't it? That'd be horrible.
That would be awful. I would not recommend that. But yeah, really interesting letter, Glenn. So thank you very much for writing in. The final letter we had was from a gentleman called Per. Now, in between our last two recordings, he actually messaged about episode 1 and episode 2. Okay, so he opens talking about Spirit Island. So you remember we asked how people prefer to play Spirit Island?
Yep.
He said he believes the game is better playing 2 rather than 1, as you have the possibility to combine your spirits. If you just play 1, you become a little bit dependent on luck, and also your spirits tend to have weaknesses which can be countered by playing more than 1. So now he's not tried 3 or more spirits, but he says he thinks it'd be a bit of a brain melt if he was to do that. So
yeah, I mean, I found it a bit of a brain melt with 2, so I can't imagine what it'd be like with that many.
I'm sure it's like something you just get used to, like same with us and Mage Knight. When I first played, I thought taking down one enemy was a brain melt, and now we're gearing up for the final, the highest difficulty.
Yeah, but imagine playing Mage Knight and then taking another turn with another Mage Knight. That's kind of what Spirit Island's like, except it's a bit less complex than Mage Knight, I guess. But it does feel a bit like you're playing. There's two players. I think
Really?
for me, when I play multi-handed, it feels a bit crazy.
Okay. Well, people really recommend it, so I'll probably still give it a go anyway.
Oh yeah, you should. Yeah.
I do think I should, but I can't lie, that does put me off. But he goes on about that subject. He said about the idea of being true solo and multi-handed. He says he doesn't actually mind. He taught himself bridge, and he did that four-handed. And in games,
Wow.
Yeah, I know.
Isn't bridge all about communicating with your other teammate? Isn't that like the sort of crux of the game? How would that work?
Yeah, Pei, you're gonna have to let us know how that works, because that's blown our minds. But he goes on to say in a game like Too Many Bones, he prefers playing as two gearlocks instead of one, for the same reason as Spirit Island. And in both Spirit Island and Too Many Bones, the game automatically upgrades the difficulty. So the map grows in Spirit Island and the number of opponents increase in Too Many Bones. So that's interesting, as although it makes the game a little bit easier, it does compensate for the difficulty elsewhere. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So he said he actually would prefer two-handed to what I referred to as true solo in the last game. So he gives us some examples of easiest solo games and hardest solo games. So he says easiest solo, he thinks Century Spice Road. It does not have a solo mode in the box, but he's tried a fan variant, and it was too simple. He crushed the Automa easily, and he knows there's another fan-made version as well, but he's not tried it. I guess if the first one was no good, there's not much incentive to try again, I suppose, so I get that.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So he does say that he has Century Spice Road almost at the bottom of his top solo list. He actually sent me a link to his solo list, which is on Board Game Geek, which I'll actually put in the show notes, because it's really awesome for you to take your time and send in this letter. So we're happy to share that, and hopefully you don't mind people having a look and interacting with you on the gig. He goes on to say his hardest is Lisboa. So this is the Vital Lasada giant Euro game. He said, read the rule book and he fell asleep.
That is a difficult game. If you can't even play the game, that might be the hardest game.
Yeah. He said he then watched the playthrough and he fell asleep.
Wow.
He's not managed to play it yet. So how about one he's played? So he goes on to say this, the agreed review, he said, this War of Mine. So it's hard to win.
Oh, yeah, this War of Mine, yeah. That has to be the hardest game.
He said it's depressing to play, but in a good way. He's actually not won Friday yet, so there you go. That massages our egos a bit, but he does want to play it more. And he said, with regards to Nyrim, he wins sort of once every 10 plays. He also thinks Robinson Crusoe is quite difficult as well.
Can be, yeah. Oh, but this War of Mine, I haven't managed to get anywhere on this War of Mine. I swear I've lost like round 2 every time or something. It's horrible. Just from some horrible scenario or whatever, just everyone dies. And I go, that's about it, isn't it? I haven't spoken to anyone who's won it, so maybe it's not possible to win it. Maybe that's the gag, and you can't win this War of Mine. You just have to die horribly somehow.
Well, I think that's a part of the game, and I said last time that I think, the idea of a game that isn't supposed to be about fun or winning or losing is actually about making you think about the theme and the context. That's, I think that's an interesting topic all in itself. But yeah, Pat, that's an awesome letter. Really, really appreciate you writing in.
Yeah, thank you so much for writing in. So is that all the messages today, Noel?
That is everything we got in response to episode 2, yes.
Okay, brilliant. So once again, the question for this episode is, what is the most immersive solo gaming experience you've had? And the links to how to contact us are all in the description. Any other feedback is very welcome. If you send us any messages, we will try and get them read out on the next episode.
Yeah, so we're contactable by email and also on Instagram. Our email is alwaysplayer1podcast@gmail.com. and our Instagram is at AlwaysPlayer1Podcast. We're also available on Facebook, and as Scruffy said, the links are in the description.
And links to my YouTube playthrough for this episode are in the description too. Well, thank you all for listening to this episode. I hope you enjoyed it, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you for listening. We'll be back in 2 weeks with another episode of Always Player One. Until then, reach out on Facebook, Instagram, or by email to keep the conversation going.